I could hear you tapping it.
Yeah, and it's turned up to 5 out there. Maybe that's
It's not
the
coming
batteries.
on. It's probably a battery
Probably
problem.
a battery issue.
No, it's live.
All right. There we go. Sometimes you need a simple reset of the system. Nothing was wanting to work, and now it's playing along. I am. It's kind of weird. You get up here and everything's on, but nothing's working. All right, we're going to start this morning in Genesis 30 at just 30 verse 27. And this timing of Jacob wanting to leave, and as Laban and he are working out this agreement that they have. So Genesis chapter 30 and verse 25. And this is where we stopped last week. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so that I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children from whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work that I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will pay you." So Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock has fared under my care, that a little you have before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied, "but if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled and spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted and speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future whenever you check on the wages that you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored will be considered stolen." "Agreed," said Laban, "let it be as you have said." And so that same day, verse 35, he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs. He placed them in the care of his son. And then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. And so Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and made white stripes on them by peeling them back, peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. And then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks whenever they came to drink. And when the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. So Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so that they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones went to Jacob. And in this way the man grew increasingly prosperous and came to his own large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. So 31:1, Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, "Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father." And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. So then the Lord said to Jacob, "Go back to the land of your fathers and your relatives, and I will be with you." So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were, and he said to them, "I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before. The God of my fathers has been with me, and you know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said the speckled ones will be your wages, then all of the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flocks that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. And the angel of God said to me in a dream, 'Jacob,' I answered, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, and spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land." And then Rachel and Leah replied, "Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you." And then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels. He drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with the goods that he had accumulated and paid in Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. And when Laban was gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he was running away. So he fled with all that he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. And on the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. And then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." So Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so that I could send you away with joy and singing to music, timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren or my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you've gone off because you longed to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob answered to Laban, "I was afraid because I thought that you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there's anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. And so Laban went into Jacob's tent. Ultimately, in the next couple of verses, he totally turns the house upside down, searching for this household god. Verse 35, Rachel said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." So he searched, but could not find the household gods. Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us. I've been with you these 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. That was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, and the cold at night. Sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters, 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you." So Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children that they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and me, and let it serve as a witness between us." And so Jacob took a stone, set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they did, piled it up in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it that name, and Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." This is why it was called Gilead. It was called Mizpah, because he said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me, when we are away," and blah, blah, blah. to the rest of the chapter. And then chapter 32 is whenever Jacob is about to meet Esau. So as we open up in chapter 30, the last part of chapter 30, as Jacob is wanting to get out of there, beginning in verse 27, and as he's wanting to leave and go back to his homeland, give me my wives for whom I have served you, and he's wanting to get out of there. He's got his wives, he's got his children, and what is Laban's response? Stay a little longer, and as you stay a little longer, I'll pay you wages. And so Jacob's response is, let's do this. Don't pay me anything. But instead, let's work out some wages with cattle, with the animals that we do have. And at whatever level I've read about this, you have in chapter 31, the scene where God ultimately tells Jacob, I've just given you a favor. As opposed to the entire idea of the poplar bark that he took off the tree, put it in the water, and then as they came, certain would mate, certain wouldn't, and then he would extract them. And ultimately, he took about 80% of the flock from Laban, which Laban's sons in chapter 31 are going to say, dude, he stole from us. He took most of your wealth. And yet it seems that, as opposed to that being the case, God just had favor for him.
Tells him in 33 of 30, my honesty will testify for me. Sure, and then he goes out of his way to do things that evidently made him become spot of the respectful.
Yeah.
But then it does show that God gave him favor too.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And so the many times that I've read through this, it's on one hand interesting that the author here would not just say in one verse, that Jacob did this. I mean, it's an entire story about how he would, isn't it called husbandry? Is that what it's called? Yeah, animal husbandry. Yeah, and that's the extent of my knowledge of it, is what they call it. And he had this whole science behind him. And then later on in chapter 31, it's literally going to say, God really did this. God had favor on him, and that's how the splitting up of these animals took place. I also want you to notice, which I find interesting, that most of the times that the word God is used, and not Lord is almost always in here, Yahweh. And almost every time that God is used, even the God of Abraham, the word again is Elohim. It's not Theos, it's Elohim. And so even whenever Laban talks about it, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac. And then the other places we're gonna see that the word there is Yahweh. In chapter 30, in verse 30, we'll start in verse 29. You know how I've worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has greatly increased, and Yahweh has blessed you wherever I have been. And so one of the things I find curious about this whole story is, much like your life, life is seldom clean. It is seldom kind of linear in terms of this happened and this happened, and it's nice and simple. Life is fairly complex, isn't it? And as you go through this story, it's complex in terms of what Jacob does, in terms of what Laban does. And when you get toward the end of this, you find these two men coming together, and Jacob ultimately, as he goes to Rachel and Leah, and what does he ultimately tell them? We got to get out of here, because your dad and your brothers are not happy at all with me. Yeah, they're not happy with me. And so we got to get out of here. And so Jacob does that. He takes off. One other interesting place in 31:13. Well, I put 31:13. Well, maybe I'll just have to find it along the way. There is a place where it speaks of, maybe that's 30:13. Yeah, that's not it either. There's a place where it talks about that God's power is what has given me the ability to do what I've done. And the word power there is the word El, E-E-L, which I've always taken, when you look at Israel and Ezekiel, Daniel, and it's the God of whatever. But the word for El, it's been identified as God, but it is actually, the word means power or mighty. And so the power or the mighty of whatever, and then it kind of gets identified with God, G-O-D. And in this one place that I thought I wrote down the right way, and it may be just in that general area, where the power of God is what has caused this, and it's the word El. Is it 16? Yeah, that might be it. Anyway, so in 31:20, I also found this interesting. 31:20. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was running away. And when you look at what these word means, the deceiver deceived Laban. So you've got a guy that kind of naturally deceives, and he deceived Laban. And I looked up the word Laban, and Laban actually means, the word means white, but it's not white like pure. It's like a whiteboard. So whenever you go up to a whiteboard and it hasn't been touched yet, what's on a whiteboard? Nothing. So the word kind of, if you westernize it, it kind of means moron. It kind of means stupid. Now, I doubt Laban was stupid because, he had his own business and et cetera, but maybe just in terms of imagery, the deceiver deceived the stupid. Yeah.
I wonder how he could have lived secretly with all of that property.
Yeah. That's a good point. Well,
How far away?
however, they after their agreement, Laban puts a 3-day distance between him and Jacob's stuff. And then after that, after Jacob leaves, how long does Laban pursue Jacob? For 7 days. So, however long it would take you to walk 3 days, how much distance that is. Now, walking, of course, is walking with your stuff, with your cattle, the whole bit, which would take some time. And then I doubt that when Jacob left, he went toward Laban's stuff. He probably went the other direction. So you have, 7 days distance between the two of them. And so that's a good question. That may be the fact that he couldn't see him and had no idea that he left. Also in 31:24, start there with the paragraph 22. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. And so taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, essentially, what's he say to him? I don't know what he says here, but essentially, what is the message?
Don't kill him.
Don't touch him. Don't kill him. Don't mess with him. Leave Jacob alone. And so do you find other places where God enters the dreams of whatever you would call not just pagans, but non-God people? And it happens in the same book. You find when Abraham goes into Egypt and Pharaoh takes Sarah, and God says, don't touch her. And then later on with Abimelech, and God goes into his dreams and says, you mess with her, you're a dead man. And then here we find somewhat the same thing where he meets him in a dream and tells him not to mess with Jacob. Don't say anything to him. And so then whenever finally Laban meets up with him, verse 22, why did you run off secretly and deceive me? And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but as you go through this story, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to look at it, how often this idea of deception comes up. And it obviously starts with Jacob and Rebekah, right? Deceiving Isaac. And then as Jacob meets up with Laban, and their whole business transaction is what? It's deception. All of it is. None of it is above board business transactions. So why have you deceived me? Why didn't you tell me so that I could send you away with joy and singing and music and of timbrels and harps? So as you're reading through the story and you're thinking about all these different themes, do you not necessarily laugh out loud whenever Laban says, "Hey, why didn't you just tell me, man? I just sent you off with celebration." No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. You'd have made another kind of deal. So I'd have sent you off with celebration. You didn't even give me a chance to kiss my grandchildren and daughters. As you read through this, so again, verse 29, I have the power to harm you. The last night, the Elohim of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you've gone off because you long to return to your father's household. Why did you steal my gods? Later on, Rachel is going to tell Jacob, or it may be before this. It's before this. Do we have any take in any of this stuff? Because our father essentially, what? Sold us to you. Sold both of us to you. And so all this stuff that you have, do we get any of this stuff? And I'm not sure if she was asking about Jacob or us specifically. Because we were the ones that were sold, which is really what happened. So how much of this do we get? How much of this is ours? I found that interesting just from a standpoint that even Jacob and Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah, it was transactional. And even the kids to the moms, as we talked about their names were even transactional in the sense of their names were based upon how the mom, the mother, the birth person, felt at the time. Oh, that may be where it is. Real quick, 31:29. Oh, that's where it is. Yeah, that's where it is. I have the power to harm you. The word there for power is El, E-L. Just like when you look at, again, names that have El in it, even Bethel, the house of God, the word itself, El, is power or might, separate from any kind of religious connotation. So it's the house of power or might. So when Jacob labeled it that, he labeled it the house of power. And they saw power also with God, with Elohim. So something interesting there. What's that? The base idea of the word is power or might. And they coupled it up with the idea of God, because God is power and might. So next week we're going to look at Jacob meeting Esau and that interesting story. And then after the first eighth, so after that we're going to look at Jacob meeting Esau. The next Sunday we won't have Bible classes because that's our youth rally weekend. And then the next Sunday we're going to start looking at some interactions that Jesus has with the Pharisees, and maybe get a different glimpse of Jesus and his reactions to these folks. And then we'll just kind of go from there. All right, well, let's close with a prayer. Loving God, we thank you. We love you. We pray that you'd continue to walk with us. We pray that we would exhibit in our lives the fruit of the Spirit, the love that you give to us, and that we continue to act like Jesus in all that we do. We pray this